Thank you very much, Murray. And I have to echo Al. I think it's going to be great. We have some great speakers. I'm giving today the same talk I've given for 43 years, Ultralight Sailplanes. I must like it.
You can clip it on your shirt
there. Today I really want to give you an overview of all the work that's been done. It isn't all the work, it's just an overview, but there has been a tremendous amount of work done. A lot has been learned, and I kind of like to put it in perspective. So that's the idea of the talk today. I'm going to try and get through it fairly quickly and then leave some time so we can have an interchange. I'm very interested in what you have to say and think about this stuff. So let's get started. Okay, I've got some background stuff. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly. This was my first type of glider, an hyper flexi flyer. I was a student. I was 19 years old. I bought it in my tax return because I had no money, and that was the only money that I could break loose. Anyway, I flew this glider at Cape Kiwanda in '75. I learned how to fly. Taught myself how to fly. Didn't have the greatest instructor. Second glider, this one I actually specifically wanted, and I worked that summer and bought it new. I think with the harness, it was $595.
Was it a kit?
No, it was a complete glider, tested, ready to go.
What about your eyebrows?
That was a kit that was assembled by somebody else. I bought it assembled. Okay. Then, in the late fall of 1975, I got a Sunriser, which Sunriser, it was a kit, and I'll go back here. Those are styrofoam ribs. They're ½ an inch wide, and they had 1/8 by ½ inch spruce cap strips. It was put together with wood glue, built the ribs in a couple of days, and they actually came out pretty good. Put plywood caps on them. So low sophistication, but it worked very well. It was cheap and it was strong enough. Here are the wings. I built this at school. A buddy of mine, there was another hang glider pilot, was the proprietor of a Christian commune, and this was their downstairs. And anyway, this is an Icarus II, or Easy Riser. It was an Icarus II. It was also called a Sunriser because it had an Easy Riser airfoil. It was a little bit later in the build sequence from a John Moody kit. And this is me, looking swell as an Oregonian. And you can see by my personal protective equipment there that I was really into that. This was really not a good idea. I didn't feel too good after this session. Okay, here's a glider all assembled. We took it out and did some ground handling near where I lived in Corvallis, Oregon. It weighed 55 pounds, 30-foot wingspan, had 200 square feet. Later on I'll talk about the flying, but it was a little bit heavier than the ones I'd had up to then, but looked real good, and it seemed sturdy. Okay, I'm getting ready there. I'm talking to a couple of guys that had flown biplane rigid wings, and so they said, well, go for it, man. So and so here we are. This is the first flight at Cape Kiwanda in 1976, and we had a good flight. It launched easily. It was very sensitive in pitch, but it was stable in pitch, so it was kind of easy to find the trim spot. The tip rudders were on twist grips on your hang tubes, and it handled really, really well. I think the TARS did a great job on that design. Okay, we're assembling it at a local hang gliding hill near Corvallis. This is called Peterson's Butte. It's still flown today after quite a long time. and is actually the gliders have better performance and they fly quite a bit better. My neighbor is at the left wingtip, kind of wondering what the heck I'm doing, and so anyway, getting ready to fly, and here's the launch, looking towards the southwest. Very nice hill. I'm about to make a left turn there, and climbed on up, and oops, let's go back. We'll talk a little bit more about this one. I ended up getting 1,000 feet over, which was pretty high for then, and flying in thermal lift. You can see there were cumulus clouds that day, and it was really pretty good. I had a Vario, which was very unusual at that time. It had an audio-visual Culver audio-visual Vario. Frank Culver, by the way, is flying hang gliders again. I think he's 83, so he's an inspiration. Anyway, that was a flight. It flew at about an hour. Really wonderful. It was very comfortable. It handled good. The coordination was very nice. It just had yaw roll coupling with tip rudders, and you moved your weight fore and aft. You could trim it very fast. You just move forward, you would stay right there, and it would go pretty darn fast. One problem with this glider was you took off hanging by your armpits, and then you threw your legs up on the front carry-through, and it was quite sensitive, so you moved the center of gravity a whole lot during that little maneuver, and then you put the seat on. And a couple of times I flew off of cliff launches where you're hanging by your arms, and that was pretty darn scary. And later on they had the Safety Pro harness, which allowed you to be hooked in, and you actually tightened up the harness after you got it, so you couldn't fall out of it. There were multiple deaths of people falling out of the parallel bar gliders. Serious error. I took it to Klamath Falls. There at Stucco Mountain. It's a really nice soaring site, and they fly sailplanes in the area. We were at the top of the hill, and the dust devils started picking up, and had a really strong dust devil come through. As a matter of fact, the dust devil was more than 1,000 feet high as it came up the hill. There was no dust up there because there were so many dust devils. And there was rocks about the size of your fist, and it was picking those rocks up and spewing them out like machine gun fire. So anyway, it aimed straight up the hill to miss us by about 100 feet, and again, I was afraid that it didn't really, I didn't expect it to do anything, but it did. It moved over 100 feet and went right over the glider. There were 4 of us holding the glider down. It lifted all 4 of us off the ground. And and as it did, the top skin burst, and it sucked the ribs out, and they went out through the hole. And then I screamed. This happened fairly fast. It was like within a second or so. I screamed to let go, and everybody did. So the glider spun up into the air, and there was a large power tower behind the launch. It went up about 100 or 150 feet, and then it pushed it backwards against that tower, and the tower was quite huge, and you could see it go whoom like that, and the glider broke in half, and then it pulled it off, turned it sideways, and broke it in half again. So at this point I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be flying that one again. And then the gap cover on the top wing is a piece of 20 thousandths aluminum. It was about 39 inches long, 6 inches wide, a piece of aluminum, solid aluminum. Last time I saw it was 2,000 feet over, flipping in the thing, and then I couldn't see it flashing anymore. It got too high. So anyway, it's a good day, except for this. And this is a typical Oregonian hang glider pilots. These are all my friends. I look like them. Interesting. I like that time, actually, but we did look different. Glider was broken up. I still have the tip rotors. I forgot to bring them today, but I still have them. Anyway, that's me. And the guy in the back, Steve, has cold beer. He's bringing them to me. Okay, that ended that. I really like that glider. It handles so much better than my other hang gliders that I had, and it had much better performance. By then, John had come out with the Easy Riser in 1976, and it was a great glider. I really liked it. By the way, it took 200 hours to assemble my Icarus II, and that included all the covering, so it was very fast. So if we look at what an ultralight glider would be, that you could do it rapidly, that would be a pretty good place to start looking anyway. My Easy Riser, you can see it's got a lot more paint on it, and that took the longest of anything on here. It took 80 hours to assemble. So John Moody, did an excellent job on engineering that design. It was strong. It assembled quickly. It took me about 25 minutes to put the Icarus together. The Easy Riser could put it together in 6 or 7 minutes by myself. So that was pretty darn good. Army Air Corps insignia with squadron leader stripes on it. And here it is flying in Eastern Washington. I went up there after I got out of school. Quit school. Delighted my parents. Anyway, I've become a professional hang glider pilot. So here I am. I'm now a professional hang glider pilot. Yeah, it was hard eating. It was hard to get enough to eat. I don't have that problem anymore. Okay, so anyway, Easy Riser, it was wonderful. The guy on this wingtip right here is Dan Pritchett, Rad Dan Pritchett, hang glider pilot. He owns a launch point at Elsinore. And very unfortunately, he was burned out about a couple of weeks ago. So his house and the houses of other people that lived up there were burned up. Everybody was okay. So anyway, good guy. I've flown with him for over 40 years.
How much did this one weigh?
This one was 50 pounds. So same wingspan, 170 square feet, 50 pounds. It was delightful to operate. Because the rudders were larger, you can see they're about 30% bigger area. They're also inboard, and the polar moment of inertia and roll and yaw was less. This was quite snappy. It was really fun to fly. And I flew it. This is Badger Mountain. It's near Richland or West Richland, and I started to fly there pretty regularly. It was great. It would trim up to about 35 miles an hour very, very easily with no effort at all. And the winds blew strong out there in the desert. And I started flying with sailplanes. And one time Rudy Allman came by in his H301 LaBelle, and he buzzed the hell out of me like over and over again. And I started looking down as you go underneath me about 50 or 100 feet under me. I realized he was trying to show me that he was eating a sandwich while he was going by, so I got interested. And I called him up, and I ran across Bob Moore, very famous guy who used to come here before he passed away, and Eric Greenwell, and they offered me a route into Soaring. And so I got my first flight in a sailplane, and ASK-13 as a result of this. Very, very great, nice place to fly, and I also bought John Moody came out with, I've been saying this, I may have some of my names wrong, but John Moody came out with the Moody Maximizer, which was essentially a go-kart racing engine, I think it was 175 cc's, direct drive engine, and I set that up on the glider, and it became the power riser, motor glider. So I've been interested in motor gliders a long time. I did fly this quite a few times, about maybe 20 times, and it scared me almost every single time I flew it. And so eventually I realized that it wasn't going to be for me, so I sold it to a friend of mine. And he put landing gear on the glider, on his easy riser, and then it was okay. But it was a takeoff, and also he weighed 50 pounds less than I did, so he actually had a positive climb rate. I did have one good soaring flight with the power riser. I launched off Kiona, this site, and I motored up to about 1,500 feet above the flatlands over the back. And when I got there, great thermal, you know, 6-8 knots, shut off, climbed 5,000 feet, flew up to cloud base, flew out and back about 10 miles. And it was so wonderful that it has infected me ever since. So, but I've never had another motor glider. May have to change that in the long run. Okay, yeah, I heard that. My wife is now starting to wonder about it. I wanted to include this. This is really not an ultralight sailplane, but we were flying hang gliders at the same time. I've owned, I think, like 40 different hang gliders and flown. I had a list, and it was 117. So I really liked hang gliders. I still have a couple of hang gliders, but I think I've aged out to the point where it's not very much fun for me. But this glider right here was, I told you about Rad Dan Pritchett. This glider, when we finally put it away, had somewhere north of 1,200 hours on it. I had owned it. I bought it used, and I flew the heck out of it. It climbed really, really well, and had lots of low climbs. And it really is 36-foot wingspan, 180 square feet, weighed about 58 pounds or something like that, so it's very light. And it handled good, so it climbed great. I flew the heck out of it. I got another glider, and Dan got it from me. He flew the heck out of it. He flew way more than I did, and then it was all ragged out, and the seams were coming apart on the trailing edge. And a friend of ours, Mark West, had moved in with Dan. Dan got another glider, a newer one. And Mark is a sailmaker, so he redid the glider, and he flew it as much as Dan and I did too. So that glider ended up with the most flying hours of that time. Everybody loved it. And I just talked to somebody yesterday, somebody here that about the maybe it was Dean.
Yeah.
But anyway, he said that his Oli 180 was one of his favorites as well. Great glider. We flew him a lot. This was a Comet. It came out in the early 80s, and it was a big change. Performed way better, and we started having great flights. We flew a lot. We're suddenly now flying good flights almost every time, gaining 5,000 to 6,000 feet and flying cross country and stuff like that. Here's another Comet, a bigger one. This one I really liked. I got fourth place at the Nationals in '81 on this glider, and made Washington State record distance flights. So anyway, some problems with hang gliders. One, they're getting harder, especially compared to then. Now it's hard to find a place to go fly. Not nearly as many flying sites. Also, not as many people that are flying hang gliders as back then. Okay, now let's get really into ultralight sailplanes. I moved to LA in '82 and came up here to this meet in '82. Jim Maupin was there showing off, and I can't remember what he was showing off. I think it was the Woodstock. But met him, and he invited me to come over and see what he was doing, and if I wanted to, I could help out. So that was the best deal I've ever done. It was wonderful. Irv and Jim were working together on it. Jim was really the designer, but Irv gave so much excellent advice. It was just amazing. They did the Carbon Dragon. We were trying to finish up the Windrose prototype at the time, and so that put the Carbon Dragon on the back burner for a while, but I worked on both gliders with them. And here's a picture of the Carbon Dragon. It's kind of a fuzzy picture, sorry about that, but this is at a local hang gliding site called Convict. This flight was a bungee launch off the hill. The Carbon Dragon weighed 144 pounds when we did the first weight and balance. We had to put some trim weight on the tail to balance it for everybody. And for guys like me that were way over the top of the weight range of the design, there was a big trim weight. And so it ended up being just barely under 155 when it was trimmed for me. But mainly because there's a big chunk of steel in the tail. We tried to fly in. There was the thought at the time of the Carbon Dragon was it was going to be a world record-setting rigid wing hang glider. And the pilot in mind for that was Rich Pfeiffer, and Rich actually built some parts of the glider. And Rich was a fairly small guy. He weighed about 150 pounds, so the design weight for the glider, the pilot weight, was 150 pounds. And so I weighed 210 at the time. I was way over the top of the weight. It was also had reduced allowables over most of the aircraft design requirements. So it had a 5G at 150 pounds. So in actuality, it was under-designed compared to the average glider. And the whole idea was to keep the weight down. And that's going to be the problem for every ultralight sailplane. If you really want to make 155 pounds, you're going to have to try really hard in design, in testing to make sure your material allowables are adequate, and then in the actual building and construction, you have to. So anyway, it took a long time. I think Jim told me that he had kind of kept a running tally of the hours people put on it. It was around 6,000 hours for the prototype. So that is really expensive if you're going to do it in production. Anyway, we did the Spongy Launch. There were two guys there. That was it. You know, two guys. They had about, I think, 5/8 inch diameter bungee cord. And I remember thinking, that's not very much. And we had kind of a mild day. It was about 10, 12 mile an hour wind up the hill. And Jim was on the tail, holding the tail back, and a couple of hang glider pilots were towing it, and had a guy on the tip. And we said, go. And I remember maybe the wheel rolled one circumference. I don't think it did quite. It just flew straight out. It was so easy, no problems at all, no pitch bobbles, no yaw, no roll. It just, you're boing, you're in the air. Anyway, it was a pretty good soaring day, kind of mild soaring day. I got a couple thousand feet over and flew the whole valley. Flew with some hang glider pilots to launch later on. And I was very surprised because my good friend Mark West was flying a 220 Dream, which is a very large hang glider, single surface hang glider with lots of wingspan. And he normally got on top of everybody. And I remember we came together in the first thermal, and my climb rate was about double his. And I was climbing at the same radius that he was. I had the flaps down. And so I thought that was interesting, so I did it about 3 or 4 more times, which annoyed the hell out of me. But it climbed so much better than a good climbing hang glider that and that was has been confirmed by virtually everybody who's flown Carbon Dragons. They climb exceptionally well. They handle good. You can't see out of them very well, but it's a really good ultralight. Okay. Gary Osaba bought the prototype and took it and did some really fantastic flying, writing, and presentations. He came here many times. I always liked this shot. This shot was taken by his ground crew, Wink Peck, down on the ground, and he was, you can see he's pretty low there. He made a save from about 40 feet off the ground, and then climbed multi-thousands of feet back in and flew cross country. One of the interesting things you can see here, those are his elbows. That, you can stick your arms out the side on the Carbon Dragon. I always liked that. Couldn't see out very well, but man, it was pretty cool.
Speed brakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, just a couple of things. This is me flying a topless glider that I had for a while. So I still kept flying hang gliders for a bit. And this is a Falcon hang glider that I still have, and I've also got a U2. I sold that topless glider, too heavy, and the handling was too bad. So anyway, I kind of kept at it. At the time that I was doing this, we were losing lots of sites. At one time, I had 8 launch spots in this valley that I could launch an ultralight sailplane from. And I thought, you know, I've got to do this. We've got to really start operating from here. And indeed, at El Rancho, the name of this hang gliding site, Floyd Fronius launched the GOAT from here and flew back and landed at one of our meetings. Is Floyd here? No.
He might be here this afternoon.
Okay, cool. Anyway, now we have one hang gliding site that we still have permission to fly at. So unfortunately, I think that could be changed if somebody would go out there and actually talk to people and do things, but I don't have time, so I'm not going to do it. Here's the site that's left, called the Twins. This was a flight a few years ago, and I flew there a few months ago in that same glider. Nice flying site. It's only 150 foot high on the smaller of the 2 knobs, and 200 feet on the higher. And we flew the Carbon Dragon there. We flew a bunch of other ultralight sailplanes there. It's got the ability to tow up, so I still like this hill. Okay, I got into soaring. I got my license in, I think, 87. So I didn't really, no, it was 82. It was 82. I flew sailplanes a little bit. It was always kind of expensive. I didn't really have when I lived in LA, didn't have a place to keep it easily, and so I held off. Got into sailplanes, and this is the glider we have now, an ASW 27. We bought it 15 years ago. It's a great glider. As a matter of fact, it's just wonderful. Right now, I'm working on upgrading avionics, complete new avionics, and FLARM and ADSB out, and all the junk you need to fly contests and stuff. Anyway, I really like one thing about sailplanes. Well, there's a whole lot of things I like about it. It's not as exciting to me as the hang gliding was, but nowadays hang gliding feels too exciting. So it's a better fit that way. But some of the main, practical considerations. It's comfortable in there. We're using freezing when we get to Cloud Base up in the Owens Valley, and our hang gliders are just so cold that you're in hypoxia. It was difficult to do the oxygen, although I did fly with oxygen in the hang glider. And it handled better in turbulence. And it also couldn't be flipped upside down. I've been inverted several times in hang gliders, And I've never had a tumble or broke the glider, but multiple of my friends have. So I'm still concerned about that in heavy turbulence in a hang glider, or even other types of light wing loading gliders. And in particular, paragliders in these kind of conditions. It's amazing to me, but there are many cross-country paraglider pilots that still fly in the Owens Valley, and they've become very proficient in it. But it's a little scary for me. Anyway, enough of that. I want to talk about some other examples of ultralight sailplanes. I'd like to add one thing on the Carbon Dragon. The Carbon Dragon plans are available. As a matter of fact, we're going to auction off 2 sets of plans tonight. So if you want to get a set of plans for the Carbon Dragon, it's there. So second thing is, there's a great website. It's I think it's the Irish Hang Gliding Association website, where the plans for the Carbon Dragon are available for download for free, so you can get those. The Gruno Baby was one of the best intermediate type sailplanes ever, and they built many thousands of Gruno Babies. There's Len Erickson has one down here that he built with some modifications to it. You can go down and look at it today. Len, hold up your hand. Okay, that's Len, and he's got some cool stuff down there. So go and see that airplane. Thing about a Gruno Baby, and you can talk to Lynn about the details, but you can still get plans for it. So right now, there are some plans still available. Not many, and maybe you wouldn't want to, but it's a safe, good flying glider. There's a Cherokee 2. Cherokee 2 is about the same size class as ultralights, but it's quite a bit heavier, and it doesn't actually climb like they do. But it kind of shows about like what it would look like. Woodstock was very close to an ultralight. The prototype weighed 235 pounds without any paint on it. It was just clear dope. And it flew very well, and multiple people have done great flights. This is Cam Martin at Oshkosh, and somebody, whose glider was that?
That's Matt Michaels.
Matt Michaels.
That was not built by Matt.
Yeah. Very.
Bob Wander's airplane.
Yep. This is another Jim Moppin design, Earth Culver collaboration. Very nice glider. You can get plans for this for free on that same website. Okay, the Silent ultralight glider came out. It's an Italian design, 13-meter wingspan. They've done quite a few developments since then, but this is a very nice flying glider. It has high 30s. I think they even claim 40-to-1 glide ratio. This is really a pretty good example of an ultralight sailplane. Now, it doesn't, you have to go by the definitions to say if it is or isn't of various kinds. There's lots of definitions. I'm not going to go into it, but it's on the heavier side. Heavier wing loading, heavier empty weight. But a very nice glider, climbs well, and it has something that I think we're going to hear about, and that is it has electric propulsion available, and it's probably the most prolific electric glider, maybe any electric thing out there. So Dean's going to talk about that later, and I'm very interested to hear that. Here's a Banjo. It was built in the Czech Republic. I think it's about 14-meter wingspan, about 300 pounds empty weight. This glider climbs really well, and people like it a lot. It also has a motor glider version. I don't know if it's still in production or not. Here's a Sparrowhawk. Sparrowhawk is out of production. They built about, I think, I've seen different numbers, between 25 and 40 Sparrowhawks. And great little glider. I had a chance to fly this glider, the yellow one. It was a prototype, and it handled beautifully. It was very nice to fly, very comfortable also. Quite a large cockpit. Even the big guys fit in this one. So anyway, Jim Payne, you can see there, he flew the longest real ultralight category flight at 12:59. It was in wave, so that's hard to do otherwise, but yeah, make it. And, here's the Lighthawk that Danny Howe did, and it was a little bit above part 103. He was hoping that he could hold it under 155, and the ones that I heard about, and I heard it from different people, so I don't know what's real, about 185 to 200 pounds for the different ones. Big wing, 15-meter wingspan, fair amount of area, like 130 or so square feet, and lots of control surface with a thick wing. This glider climbed really, really well. I worked with Mark Stuckey, Forger, for a while, and we talked about this glider quite a bit. And now he's chief pilot at the spaceship company, and just was in the New Yorker with a tell-all, which I loved. This glider is no longer available. And is Danny Howe here? Danny Howe now lives here in Tehachapi. He's a neighbor of mine up the hill. Okay, so a few years ago, I was, doing all this hang glider towing. I didn't really tell you about it, but we had a payout winch, and we did lots and lots of flights from payout winch, and it was really fun. So we thought, let's do some ground launching out in the desert with some new people, and we took some folks from here and folks from work, and went out to a dry lake and flew. And we also got T-shirts, and this guy built a model with with the Sororama. So that was, yeah, we had a great time. Yeah. So here's a setup at Sororama. Right in the middle is Patty Bird and some other people from Scale. And one of the guys that this is a design engineer, later a consultant engineer on the coast. Real great guy, Gabe Sanchez. Okay, and Floyd came out, and we towed him up in the Red Goat, and he gave flights to, I think, about 5 or 6 people who had sailplane ratings, and they all flew the Red Goat. And I had a flight there where I flew the 222, and Forger was flying the Red Goat, and we were at the same altitude with some energy, and well, we just had to wrap it up, and I killed Forger. I think he was a little surprised, but I got him a couple of times. Then he got me later. Okay, so we towed both of these gliders out in the desert, had a great time. Had about 50 people or so. I think we made around 60 flights in the 222 where we took somebody out. So everybody got to fly. One of the other engineers, Nick Sharika, he's now a project engineer on the Boom aircraft. Okay. It had a CG hook, still does. I don't have to buy it though. So Josh took this video and he also did the music and all that kind of stuff. He's done hundreds of these things. This was, you're going to see a pulley. This was a reverse pulley static line. And it was it was only a 2,200 foot wing area. So we wanted to use the whole length, and that's why we did the reverse pulley. Tows up to 700 or 800 feet, so it was a good, you got some good tows. No climb outs. But if you have good video, you don't need that. But when you don't have good video, then you really do want it. So that's Todd Schultz in the front. He's one of the brothers. Yeah, Beach chased him down. So I really like ground towing, and I believe it's still, and you've heard me, and many of you have anyway, speak about this, but I think it's still a good option. It's not easy to do though, because it requires a lot of space, and it interferes with, you know, paying rides and things like that, so you don't get to do it very often, or you need to go set it up somewhere. But so Beach is still around. He's getting old now. There's the reverse pulley. That's Lens for Schweitzer, yeah. This is going home. It was nice because I got a nice ride down there and a ride back with Jeff's dad's tow plane.
This is now Josh's.
It's now Josh's tow plane. So that was really a fun day. Okay, so I'm going to quickly go through some other ones that are out there, and then we'll go into some question and answer. Eric Raymond is one of the most brilliant designers that I know of, and he did this little glider called the Edelweiss after his first aircraft, the electric motor glider. And the Edelweiss, I think, has been kind of, people don't know about it quite as much as should be. This was a 15-meter span, true Part 103 ultralight design with a good airfoil. So I don't have very many anecdotes about it. I think he was very busy with his electric propulsion motor glider, and so I haven't heard what it can do. But this is a really nice glider. And here it is on landing. I think Floyd's got it now, but I'm not sure really what's going on. Okay, and here's another very good design. This, essentially, the Archaeopteryx was developed in Switzerland. They did a really good job on it. It's extremely detailed, and it is also a true Part 103 ultralight, about a 13.5-meter wingspan. Weighs about 130, I think 134 pounds empty. So it's quite light with all that fairing stuff on there. They have a great website. If you haven't seen this, you should go to their website. It shows foot launching, bungee launching, roll-off launching, auto tows, aero tows, and it's really quite impressive. It costs, right now, if you want, this is in production. They built somewhere around 15 of them. If you want one, they'll build it for you. It's just about $110,000. So, you know, there's a lot of molds and stuff, and it's very. They now have electric propulsion on all of the competitive Class 2 hang gliders. So the Swift, Light, Electro, and the Archaeopteryx with the electric propulsion. are both, and they also recently got permission to use those propulsion systems during competitive flight. So now you can use electric propulsion, and what it does is it helps the organizers for these world meets where they don't have to have aero towing or a suitable place to launch these, which it needs to be a little bit nicer than a regular hang glider launch. But anyway, great airplane. Here's another glider that you can still get the plans for, the ULF-1, and Len also has a ULF-1, so you can go down and see that, and I would recommend that you go do so. Anyway, I think this is one of the best detailed design ultralights that's out there right now. It's certainly more reliable structure than the Carbon Dragon as far as strength to weight and all that. It doesn't perform nearly as well though. But they fly pretty good, and I've seen pictures at least a dozen different ones, so they're out there. They're probably 25 or 30 been built. Okay, Super Floater was put into production about 20 years ago, something like that, and a couple of guys up in Mountain Green, Morgan, Utah, built this thing, and it was really fun to fly. This is me on Soggy Dry Lake. Some guys bought one of these used, and we went out there and flew it. It was really fun. If you notice, most of these pictures of towing is out in some godforsaken desert where it's hot as hell, and so anyway, but it's really fun to go out there. But it doesn't appeal to wives and girlfriends and things like that. So this is not, I'm really, and it doesn't appeal to me as much as it used to. So anyway, I'm not sure anymore about how much towing. It'd be ideal to like have a local area where you could get towed up by a winch or something like that. It'd be great. So I'm going to have just a few thoughts to keep in mind here. I still think that ground towing can be done for low cost. It's just not as easy to make happen as it probably ought to be. Ultralight gliders can climb exceptionally well. It's not true of everyone. There are lots of them that don't have very good performance, but some of them are just spectacular. So I really would have liked to have known how the Edelweiss did. I do know that the Archaeopteryx is astounding. They've now flown more than 500K triangles, and it's on the online contest of flights in Australia and Archaeopteryx. And it's kind of interesting because a man and a woman bought an Archaeopteryx, and then what they do is they'll go out and fly a big triangle on Saturday, one of them, and then the other one gets in the next day and does another big triangle. So it's a real deal. And this stuff is really, really fun. So anyway, I would like to open it up to questions, and I think we have a few minutes maybe.
Are there any of the Archaeopteryx in USA?
Yeah, there's 2 Archaeopteryx motor gliders, with the electric propulsion in somewhere in the southeast. There's a flying site where they fly model airplanes in full scale, and they have a huge contest every year, and unfortunately I can't remember the name of it, but they're based there. And I saw pictures of them soaring with some black vultures. That's the other thing about an ultralight sailplane that is amazing. Is I flew with some vultures in the Carbon Dragon, and I outclimbed them. And I've never done that in anything else. So they really do have good climbing performance.
What's the major construction of those airplanes you're talking about? Is it wood or?
So it completely varies across the thing. There's the Carbon Dragon was a mostly wood sailplane, had ribs, a D-tube out of plywood, and carbon spar caps with a wooden shear web. The super floater had aluminum tubes, Dacron fabric. The Archaeopteryx is a carbon composite, very complex, very well detailed design. So the big problem with ultralights is if you want a quiet one or a low cost one, you end up with really high tech construction, and the cost and the time to build is pretty high.
Say that again.
So a high performance ultralight sailplane ends up with too much cost. The materials cost too much, the tooling costs too much, the labor costs too much. So you end up with very complex designs. So it's a trade-off. Somebody's going to figure it out where a sweet spot is, but we haven't really found it yet. Go ahead.